Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Yes, yes, yes. We had sort of a rocky start. Why did we have a rocky start? Because we were alternating between internet, both cellular and cable. All kinds of internet problems. But you know what? Nothing stops politics done right, folks. Nothing stops politics done right. The internet can try. Everything can try to stop politics done right. But you know what? We are a coming. Politics done right is a coming. Whether we do it right away or whether we do it not so right away, politics done right is here. Anyhow, what's up, my dear brothers and sisters? What's up? I'm going to tell you what's up. We have COVID-19. We have a country in disrepair. We have a country in trouble. But are we going to allow that to dictate anything? Are we going to really sit back and say, oh my God, look at what's happening to our country? No, no, no. We are going to do something about it. And that is what this show is all about today. As soon as I get all these bearings with the show put together, that is what the show is about today, and it's important that we take a look at it. The first thing that we're gonna have is we're gonna bring on what Steve Schmidt had to say about the president. I just want to put that first into context because I think it is important for us to hear from those who used to be the followers of of the party, the followers of the Trumps, etc., etc., etc. So let's go ahead and get busy. Let me just go ahead and clean out a few things because as it turns out, I believe there are some who are still looking at the non-live version of the show, the version of the show that shouldn't really be there. So what we're going to do is as I get started with this, I'm going to start attempting to clean some of that up because whenever you have a bad start, whenever things start in a slow manner, this is what we have to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Steve, and after Steve, we'll go ahead and get directly into talking. So here we go.
Donald Trump sees and why we're reading accounts in newspapers like the Washington Post and the New York Times about the turbulence in the campaign or poll numbers that show his numbers collapsing in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and close contests in state like Texas. So the American people are watching this play out every day, and they understand that this is not what competency looks like. This is not what a strong leader looks like. And I think that the American people in majority numbers are coming to a conclusion, which is this president is totally out of his depth. He's outmatched completely. He lacks literally every conceivable quality necessary for leadership in a crisis, and he's failing at a time of testing for the country at a historic level. There has never been an American leader who has performed as incompetently, as ineptly, as poorly as he has. And literally everything he says, we range from the imbecilic, which is the suggestion that the American people should protect themselves by injecting disinfectant, to the daily dishonesty and lying that the American economy, which will touch on 25% unemployment, will magically be restored in the fourth quarter or the first quarter next year. And it's all magical thinking, as Eugene says, just like when he said 2 months ago that when there were only 15 cases, it would soon go away. Just like when he said the Chinese were doing a great job and he had full confidence in President Xi. This response by this administration couldn't have been worse if you had a group of saboteurs working in the West Wing of the White House trying to harm the country. It's just epically, terribly bad. So we see now the inventions of the ludicrous Obamagate scandal. We'll see the race baiting and xenophobic bash China and blame them. But he'll put himself into the role of America's biggest victim. He will portray himself as the injured party, as what happens in this country, the world's epicenter of coronavirus death and suffering, as our death count crosses the 100,000 person threshold, and then ultimately the 200,000 person threshold, and likely north of that. And none of it ever had to happen.
And none of it ever had to happen. And none of it ever had to happen. Eugene, Eugene from that's always on MSNBC had a piece to write where he says, "Now the rest of the world pities us." Think about that. The rest of the world pities America. When would you have ever believed you would have heard that statement? The rest of the world. And it's not hyperbole, because you know what, as somebody who entertains and has a whole lot of connections outside of America, after all, I'm originally from Panama, Central America, I can tell you categorically that the rest of the world, in fact, pities us. To them, how could we have fallen this far so fast? How could have an empire? And that is what we are. We don't like to say it quite often, but we were an empire. How could we have fallen this fast after having a child, after having a people that have elected one who has the mind of a child? Well, actually, you know what? When my daughter was in the 8th grade, she was so much more intelligent, so much more pragmatic. She had so much more. I sit down and I think about her, how she was in middle school. And not even that is a likely comparison for what we have as a president. I listen to kids in elementary schools that have more maturity than the president that we have right now. Those 80-something thousand people that are dead today is a response. It's our president is responsible for. Yesterday, I wrote I saw a tweet by Kurt Eichenwald, the reporter. He said, a Kroger employee died of COVID-19 on day it announced it would be, and today it is announced it's cutting $2 an hour from the people who are sacrificing their lives to sell to to sell to customers, to sell to us. They're going to cut their salaries by $2 after they gave them $2 for hazard pay, as if the hazard has subsided. The hazard is getting worse, but we have a president telling the populace that, oh, it's no big deal. And then it gives the corporations a reason to say, oh, it's no big deal. $2 we are taking back, no more hazard pay. But we love you employees in as much as we are milking you to make our money. And that is all a direct result of the person we have as president of the United States. Somebody with the mind of a child. And, it is, to some extent, it is frustrating because it doesn't have to be. This country is full of intellect. This country is full of intelligent people. And to think, including some of them standing on the stage with the president, and to think that they are all simply coalescing to the desires of a madman, to the desires of somebody with a small intellect, to the desire of somebody taking us to the wrecking ball, to think that that is what we're dealing with here. America, we better do better. We better do better. Because the fact of the matter is, he is taking us directly into the ground. The rest of the world sees it. There's a 40-something% of the population of the United States, which is minute in the world. Those are the only people keeping this world, not just America, but the world on edge. Think about it. We have 40% of the American population that has the world on edge. And what we have to do is talk to some of those guys and get some of those guys to see the light beyond the light beyond their ideology, the light beyond their prejudices, and the light beyond all these things. Because I tell you, when we all go under, they're going under too. But by then it's too late. By then it is too late. Today I was in a virtual town hall with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, as well as Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon. Tlaib is from Michigan. What I want to do before I get into what I'm playing for today is let you listen to what she had to say about COVID-19, about a whole lot of other things that we have to get taken care of, and then we'll take it on the other side.
you so much, Jennifer, and to everyone, and Senator Merkley, who's been a wonderful partner in trying to make water a human right for all of us during this global pandemic. So I sincerely appreciate this conversation, especially now as we are fighting on the House floor to get this going, but also to really have a productive debate about what's in and what's not. I represent the 13th Congressional District, which is Detroit, and a number of what we call Wayne County communities. And one of the things to know is, I represent the third poorest congressional. So when I talk about some of these, issues that you are on the ground fighting for, just know our community has felt very much directly what doing nothing looks like around our economic divide, environmental racism, just the number of things that have really pushed more people, especially children, into poverty. And so for us, it was very, very important for my team and I and many of the community activists on the ground, when the governor and others were asking people to wash their hands, we said, what about the ones who don't have water? When you're asking them to do all the things of 10 times a day to wash your hands, and right now you have thousands of people across the country, not only here in Detroit or in Flint or other communities where they've been completely cut off with water, some even as a number of years. And so we pushed for, obviously, a moratorium. And a moratorium, obviously, we support, and we're very much active on that, and it's in place. But know that a moratorium is temporary, y'all. Like, after this is done, what happens? Those bills, it's still going to be due. And so before that, the United Nations was right in Detroit talking about the lack of access to water and affordability and clean water when Flint became this national crisis. So it's very important for us to have something in the bill to basically address access to water. And so we have a $1.5 billion investment that's in the bill currently of creating kind of a direct payment to people. A lot of folks have, different approaches, but we wanted to use the kind of approach that community action agencies use, where it's like through LAHEAP, where we're actually dealing with the families one-on-one. Because as Mary and Jean probably heard, especially in Michigan, it's not only just, hey, go over there and turn a knob and turn the water on. There's also infrastructure issues. People need plumbing, and also you got to make sure that water is clean. And so we, again, have a requirement around moratorium, a national moratorium on water shutoffs, but a reconnection. This is a huge win for us, a reconnection requirement, and the 1.5 billion, which we know will have to grow. That it can't be just a one-time investment. The next thing is, as we talk about our communities, they're in survivor mode already before the pandemic. I mean, they were living check by check, as you all know. I think I read somewhere 40% of our neighbors across the country, somebody in the household lost a job. And I believe many of that could be permanent job loss, not just temporarily because of the pandemic. We're seeing a really a growing number of small businesses that are not bouncing back already, and 30 million plus people on unemployment. A third of our neighbors couldn't pay their rent in April. I don't know what the numbers are in May. So this is really crisis. And on top of all that, Jennifer, you centered us at the beginning, and I think it's really important in recognizing so much death and loss for so many of our families, 80,000 plus, and it's growing. And so we want direct aid to people. We don't want the bureaucracy. So we want reoccurring payments, and that's why the Automatic Boost to Communities Act is critical. And we see bipartisan support for it. We've seen polling come out of bipartisan support outside of Congress in support of, let's do $2,000 a month during this pandemic, and other countries are doing this. It helps people, give them human dignity. Moratoriums, again, are the Band-Aid, but what happens afterwards? And so the Automatic Boost to Communities Act is aggressive, it's bold. It really does include every single person that lives among us, and it will save lives. People need to be able to have some sort of consistency and some sort of support that we got you. You don't have to, fight through bureaucracy to get food assistance or food on the table. You don't have to, be fighting with your landlord because they're also struggling or whatever. You hear all these stories come out. And so we want to be able to, again, we've done it for corporations for so long, where we hand them out these big bailouts, no oversight. And I just don't know why we aren't doing a people's bailout and saying they deserve a reoccurring payment. And I know many of my folks, when they got the one-time payment, they paid off debt. They paid off debt that they had before, again, creating stability for many of our folks that are living in poverty. I leave with this. What I like in the bill, and this is really important for folks to know, just like people are been in survivor mode, our local governments have been. So many of them have seen changes and shifts in taxes. And I'm telling you, they've lost so much and they were in survivor mode. So now imagine with the pandemic, they are getting all of these PPEs, ordering all the things that they need to save lives and watching also their firefighters, the local law enforcement getting sick and dying and wanting to expand testing at the local level. And to me, when Federal Reserve Bank says banks are too big to fail, I say local governments are too critical and too important to fail. And they really are that's who contacts our residents have contact with, not the federal government. It is the local governments. And so we have, a massive aid for them. But what I love in there specifically, and I think Senator Berkeley supports this, is when we do FEMA reimbursements right now, it's 75% reimbursement rather than getting it to 100%. Again, we are dealing with a global pandemic. So if it's sites, one of my counties is doing a spectacular thing and saying, hey, if you're a small business and you need a loan to change the makeup of your business so that you can open up safely, and they should be reimbursed for that, right? I mean, there should be a flexibility to pay hazard pay. So I just want to, again, urge all of us as we fight for, from those that are my students to those that are fighting, even the high cost of mortgages that have been fighting for, again, all the different issues we had in our country prior to. The way I think it's going to help people the most is the reoccurring payments, getting back to that. And again, FEMA, to me, reimbursements at 100% takes away the politics. These small communities, less than 20,000 people, they don't have the capacity to constantly be applying for various grants, competing with other communities and fighting for small dollars. But boy, if they're spending money to save lives during COVID, then they should be reimbursed for that. And so I will leave you with all that. And I would be remiss, and my Congressional Progressive Caucus would be upset if I didn't mention what's not in the bill, and it's something that I'm really disappointed to not see there, especially with 30 million of our neighbors unemployed, is the Paycheck Guarantee Program. This is something that we need to continue fighting. I know people are starting to more and more talk about this, but we've never seen unemployment numbers like this since the Great Depression. We have to be creative, and when we again think about how do we stop the spread? How do we make sure it is also that economic stability? It is so key, y'all, to making sure that people can stay home, that they can be safe, that they're not putting their lives at risk. And so, again, thank you all so much, especially for my 100 plus organizations that have signed on to make water a human right and supported our efforts in the House. We would never have been able to get this far in getting it in the final bill language that I'm hoping to be able to vote for today.
That was Rashida Tlaib. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't remember to tell folks this thing was put together, the COVID-19 Emergency Response Group by Joel Siegel, who used to work for a congressman. I forget the congressman's name now, but anyhow, and also Dr. Paul Zeitz. Dr. Paul Zeitz, who is the executive director of Build a Movement 2020, who put this thing together. So Dr. Paul Zeitz from Build a Movement 2020 put that together along with Joel Siegel, the National Director of the COVID-19 Emergency Response Group. Anyhow, I want you to listen now to another person that was at that, by the way, was moderated by former mayor of North Carolina, Jennifer Roberts. I want you to listen now to Merkley. Merkley from Oregon had much to say as well. Let's go with that, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining the call, and thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction. And it was a pleasure to work with you on that national board so many years ago, and to be in contact through your time as mayor and county commissioner and important fights, including the fight on climate. I thought I would just start by noting how phenomenal this time is. Could we ever have imagined? We start with the dark and dangerous times associated with from my viewpoint, what is an incompetent executive branch that has put us at risk time and time again before this crisis. And then you throw in the pandemic, and then you throw in the economic implosion, and it's just like reading an Armageddon novel. And we wake up, we go, is this really all happening right now? And it is, which is why these types of calls and communication are so important as we try to find our way through this uncharted territory. The bill that Rashida was so instrumental in working on in the House, it has a lot of good things in it. And you think about the fundamentals for family. You have food, you have shelter, you have utilities. And let me just start there and note that that bill has a 15% increase in SNAP benefits, very important. My state of Oregon is one of the hungriest in the nation, really important. On shelter, it has $100 billion for rental assistance so people can help make their rent payments, and $75 billion to help people make their mortgage payments so that they don't end up in foreclosure. So it's fighting eviction, it's fighting foreclosure. And then turning to utilities, which aren't thought about so much. And it was really a pleasure to partner with Rashida. And she emphasized the role of water. The House bill takes a even broader viewpoint of water, electricity, and broadband. And think about how essential broadband is if you're looking for work, if you're trying to communicate with friends and stay in touch, if you're a student who is now having to go to school over broadband. And it highlights the enormous inequities we have in our country. Families are not all the same, even before you get to the issue of affluence. So there's structure in some families that will help students study. There is less structure in others. There are funds in some families that mean that they have broadband and they have the equipment, others don't. So in that bill is a fund for connectivity that will help folks who have the availability of broadband but can't afford it get connected with the equipment, the initial setup, and then paying monthly fees through September 2021. So to the House, really well done on those essential utility connections. And that a broader coalition on moratorium on utility shutoffs, more than 800 groups. It's one of the largest grassroots assemblages I've ever seen. So that is terrific. Testing and tracing to take us out of this nightmare, a foundation on the healthcare side. A lot of support for that. Our state and local governments, 500 billion for our state governments and 350 billion for our local governments, and support for tribes and support for territories. So this shouldn't be an issue at all, because normally my Republican colleagues are saying, well, any government that's closer to the people is one we should support, and state government is closer than the federal government. But we have Mitch McConnell over here leading the Senate saying, you know what, we'll just let the states go bankrupt. And it's like, where is that coming from? And part of it seems to be an effort to reinforce the argument that government is the enemy, so why support them? Let them go bankrupt. I think in the end, though, I think it's more about bargaining over getting help for the mega corporations in order, while we're fighting for help for state and local government. And that's really disturbing because there is this make the rich richer, make the powerful more powerful theme to the way that my colleagues across the aisle have been acting, including in the last bill, Corona 3.5, tucked in at the last second by the chair of the Finance Committee, which is the tax committee, and by the majority leader, was 175 billion in more tax cuts for the richest Americans. So let's get that 175 billion back. And guess what? In the House bill, they get it back. So that is great. And that's the same amount they're spending on fighting foreclosures and evictions on the housing side. So that's a good movement of that 175 billion from a place that isn't needed to a place it's desperately needed. I wanted to mention two things that are not in the House bill that I'm very concerned about. One is a guaranteed access to an absentee ballot in November. And that access should exist for everyone. Oregon has had vote by mail forever, and there is a bill for full vote by mail that Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota and Ron Wyden from my state are championing, and I'm partnering with them, but they are the leads. And I have a backup plan that is a much simpler plan that says every ballot program open that up in this coming November election to anyone who wants an absentee ballot, a no excuse absentee ballot program. The infrastructure is already there. It can be amplified. We can provide financial assistance to amplify it, but nobody should have to worry about going to the polls and getting an infection this coming November. It is part of a broader philosophical battle. We have seen since the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act that one party has said, well, let's pursue all kinds of voter suppression and voter intimidation tactics because there's people we don't want to vote. We don't want college students to vote. We don't want poor people to vote. We don't want communities of color to vote. And that philosophy is so at odds with the view of government of, by, and for the people. But if you're powerful, you don't want those groups voting. And so we've got this whole voter suppression movement. And the last thing they want is to make it easier for people to cast a ballot. So this issue over being able to vote safely in November is part of a bigger battle, not just over voting access, but over the issue of gerrymandering and over the issue of dark money in politics. And there is a bill that is in the House, that passed the House, called H.R. 1. It's For the People Act. And it takes on gerrymandering and voter suppression and dark money and ethics. Here in the Senate, Tom Udall of New Mexico is the pilot. I'm the co-pilot on it. Tom's retiring, so I'm using every possible forum to say, hear those words, for the people, and think about how is the Senate going to pass that act to try to restore, take on the corruption that's inhabiting our electoral system. Because if we don't take on that corruption, we're going to lose on healthcare, housing, education, living wage jobs, Equality Act, taking on climate crisis and other environmental issues. So it's kind of the foundation. It's the first thing we should do in January 2021 if we have a majority that is ready to take on the rigged system. We have to unrig it the moment we have an opportunity to do so. The second thing that's not in the House bill is the Rewind Act. An effort to say this crisis should not be used as a moment to give more subsidies to the fossil fuel world. Instead, we should be driving a transition to renewable energy. This year, yesterday was announced that this year is the first year that the energy from renewable energy, specifically hydro, wind, and solar being the big versions of that, will exceed the electricity generated by coal. So coal is no longer king. And part of that is the environmental consciousness over climate, and part of it is the blessing that solar and wind have become cheaper than fossil fuels. And we have to really be aware of the fact that natural gas is not a solution to climate, that it produces a lot of methane leakage that does as much damage to the climate as coal does. So we've got a long ways to go. Anyway, so that's the big vision. I hope we can find a way to push on this issue of transition, using these massive resources we're investing now to transition rather than to anchor ourselves in the fossil fuel world. And so with that, let me turn it back over to Jennifer and the team.
Anyhow, that was a very, very informative town hall. We had a lot of other speakers. In fact, the town hall comprised environmentalists and just about everybody else. I'll post it. I'll post a link to the actual thing in a little bit. But let's get to the main attraction today. Today's show is going to feature Dona Murphey, Dr. Dona Murphey, a Houston activist who actually contracted COVID-19. She recovered, but she never, ever stopped. Let's go to her story, and then we'll move on from there, where I'll go to the chat room and answer some of your calls. Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm here with Dr. Dona Murphey. Donna, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay.
Well, look, folks, Donna is one of Houston's premier activists, doctor, you name it. She is it. In fact, she's given me a quick few minutes before she goes out there and do some more of her activism. What is it that you have to go do right now, Donna?
We have been planning a series of 24-hour vigils across the United States, from San Diego to Michigan to Houston to New York, New Jersey to Maryland, all across the states to demand the release of those who continue to be held in ICE custody, which we've been doing for the past couple of months. We've been vocally advocating for their release because of their susceptibility to COVID in closed quarters, which is also true for people in the criminal justice system. A lot of overlap. So yeah, we've been planning this action for a little while now, and I didn't want to miss out on it.
I hear
So
you.
I myself am sick, but am planning to show up.
Well, that is above and beyond, Donna, because if I'm not mistaken, in March you developed COVID-19. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was exposed to somebody who was working with people in a hospital, and that person became ill, and I became ill. For 28 days, I had a very diverse clinical syndrome. It wasn't just fever and shortness of breath and cough. In fact, it was no fever. I had some dysregulation of my temperature, like hot flashes, but no fever. I did have shortness of breath. I did have cough. I did have pretty profound fatigue and drowsiness. But I also had a rash. I had pretty significant GI symptoms, so not some nausea, diarrhea. Yeah, it was not a happy time for about 28 days.
And it lasted a whole 28 days, eh?
Yeah, and I'm the kind of person who typically I get sick maybe once every 1 to 2 years for a day or two. I'm not a
Right.
sick person.
Wow, that is tough. Well, look, I want to discuss with you some your a doctor's perspective on how the country is handling COVID-19. Are we doing what is appropriate right now?
No. The whole purpose of having shut things down at any level was really to diminish the prevalence of the disease. This is a viral illness, which the virus itself does not survive out of the human body for more than a period of days. So if you isolate people from one another, then you decrease the prevalence of the disease because it can't hop from person to person to continue to replicate. And the idea was to make sure that we decrease that prevalence. And by the time we were, going to come back out at any level, we should have ramped up testing. We should have ramped up contact tracing so that for that lower prevalence, we would immediately be able to identify the people who then become sick, the people who were then exposed to those who are sick, and we can quickly isolate and quarantine to contain the disease and further spread of it. And we haven't done that. We have not ramped up. Our testing capacity is now appears to be on par with, for instance, South Korea, right? It's 1% of our population. However, our testing capacity came online very late. And it also hasn't been very strategic in the way it's been targeted. So there are vulnerable populations that are still not being tested. And the contact tracing is a joke. I mean, the former leader of the CDC and I think of DHHS, they came together in April and mentioned that we needed to, as a country, increase our contact tracing to hundreds of thousands of contact tracers nationally. In the state of Texas, we were hoping to have something like 15,000 to 25,000 people contact tracing. And the governor of Texas has only stated, I don't even know if he's actually done this.
4,000, right?
Yeah, he's only stated that we're going to increase to 4,000 by May 11th, a few days ago. I don't know that that's even happened. So this is a huge problem. I mean, I don't understand what people don't get about this. It's simple science, like you have to be able to test and trace with lower prevalence, because otherwise, if you have it everywhere, then it doesn't really matter that you're contact tracing if everyone has it. But yeah, this is just a disaster.
No, so I imagine then if we keep on the path that we're on right now, we're really in for a very, very dangerous summer and fall.
Yeah, I mean, we continue to see, I mean, we maxed at 1,500 people a couple of days ago in terms of new cases in Texas. I mean, that's the highest that we've seen, right, so far. And I don't think that this is going to slow down if we continue to do this phased opening as per Governor Abbott. We're going to continue to see many, many deaths. And I think that it's quite clear that those people sitting in positions of power simply don't care.
Now, from a doctor's perspective, how dangerous, you got COVID, you survived. How dangerous is COVID? Or do you think these politicians may be making a bet saying, we are willing to lose, if it has a 1% mortality rate or 2% mortality rate, maybe we're just willing to lose those people that are gonna die from it?
I think that's quite clear. I mean, the past couple of months, it's been evident that this is killing a ton of people and very quickly, right? So I think you'd have to be a real dummy to think that that's
Right.
not the reality. I think they understand that, and they're willing they're willing to risk those lives.
Now, for those people that are, because there are a lot of people that say generally on the right, and I don't want to make this a political issue because with you I won't, but generally on the right, the people have been convinced that it is okay to go out there. Do you think they would keep that same stance? I know you're around people from all stripes. Do you think they would continue the behavior if they understood the actual death rates, and maybe that the people that they're following are taking that as maybe it's okay? Do you think they understand that?
Do they understand the real risk? Is that your question?
Yeah, do they understand the real risk, and that the politicians that are guiding them understand the risk and say, yes, we are willing for X amount of you guys to die? Let me give an example. Fox News is out all of the times encouraging people to go out to work, encouraging people to protest, encouraging all these behaviors. However, they themselves are telling their people, we won't be coming back to these offices till June or beyond, which they're saying, for us, we want to protect ourselves. But you guys go out there, work, work, work. Do you think they understand that that is what's occurring?
Yeah, that is astounding to me, because I think it's definitely out there that disparity exists in what they're advising the general public and what they themselves are doing. My perception is that probably many people who may be espousing that it's okay to open things up, that and that, that we should not be required to wear masks, that they may themselves actually still be doing those things, so I don't know why it is this issue has become so politicized. I mean, maybe it's because those of us on the left, I think rightly so, are holding people accountable in positions of power who have failed to make the appropriate decisions for the public. But it should not, I mean, us protecting ourselves and each other, that should not be a political issue.
No,
you
it should
know,
not.
it is very frustrating to me, and I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that it's actually true that people are in large numbers, because we see that in the news, right? But I don't know that it's actually true that people in very large numbers are defying the recommendations of the CDC, for instance, right?
Right.
There has been a lot of confusion, from the top, even from the CDC over the many months. And to be fair, this is a rapidly evolving situation. So I understand some of that. Some of that, I think, has been a function of being politically silenced, having doctors and scientists politically silenced.
Okay, let's stop right there. That's one thing you are not politically silenced. What will it take? Your peers. What will it take for them to further engage? Because I think you're absolutely right about that. We need the doctors, the people that people actually respect, to get out there and get out ahead of the politics. Why is it that many doctors don't do that? I see you on stage. You're going to a protest right now. Why don't we have more doctors doing that?
I mean, I think most of it is that doctors in general are really occupied, right? They're super consumed by their daily work of caring for patients and all of the administrative chores that come with that, unfortunately. I think that that's really what it is. That's my most generous interpretation. Being a doctor committing to a life of service. I think for most physicians, for many
Yes.
physicians, it is. And I think a lot of people who are in that realm, you kind of burn out on doing advocacy otherwise, because it's such an intimate part of what you have to do every day for your patients. So they know the system is broken. They know very intimately the system is so broken, but they don't have the time or the energy to devote to changing that system. And I also think that the culture of medicine, I mean, we kind of learn to take it.
Right.
Just take it, And it's medicine is very hierarchical. I don't think it is it is a discipline that encourages people to speak out against authority at all.
Oh,
So I
that
think for
that
all those reasons, yeah.
that makes sense. Now let's really quickly migrate into healthcare now and what's occurring. You know what it's gonna take with the amount of people that are gonna hit the healthcare system. You know, because we have a lot of people hitting the healthcare system. Insurance is gonna be hit hard. Hospitals are gonna be trying to recover money because you notice the emergency room was empty or not very full. You notice that a lot of elective surgeries are not getting placed. So right now we are in a financial dilemma for hospitals because they're not doing a whole lot of services, and for insurance companies because the services that they're doing will cost a whole bunch of money. What is the ultimate solution of our healthcare system? How to provide it, how to lend it? The people in England, the people in the UK, the people in France, Sweden, and all of them. Sweden never closed, but why? They have healthcare for everybody. Nobody's going to worry about being bankrupt. What is our solution, Donna?
Yeah, this is a very difficult problem because I think that the transition will be very, very painful. Moving from what I think is essentially a for-profit healthcare system in the United States, although we do have public options here, right?
Right.
It moving from that to what I think we should be doing, which is investing very heavily in public health and prevention, for instance, and in publicly funded healthcare, is going to be, I think, a difficult transition for this country, but I think it's one that is absolutely necessary. And I hope that people see that in this moment, that because we don't have a system in place that values prevention over
Mm-hmm.
acute treatment, which we don't even have for COVID, right? That they would be moved to support a transformation of the system, right? Just to completely do it over. I mean, I've never felt so committed to that. I mean, I'm in industry myself, right? Like my job is in working for a diagnostics company, and it's going to be. I think it's going to be a shock to the way we do medicine right now. But I think it's absolutely necessary, and I think it's absolutely possible to do. It's, I've been talking about pivoting towards a public health economy, right? So that everything becomes about prevention as much as possible. I mean, we still are going to have acute illnesses that we're going to have to treat, right? But right now, I think we're so motivated. Our system is so motivated by acute therapies that are really expensive, that are in large part not very evidence-based, honestly. I mean, it's very, very thin evidence for a lot of the interventions that we do, which also have, cause what we call iatrogenic injury, meaning we in healthcare are injuring people by doing some of the therapies that we do, right? But somebody is profiting. So we're motivated to keep doing it, right? We're
Right.
motivated to keep treating people with those drugs that have a million side effects. We're motivated to keep treating people with the, or using medical devices, for instance, that are not very well vetted, right? Because somebody has money to make at the end of the day.
I mean, that is a magic that you just said. If there's an incentive to make money to push something, just like the president was pushing hydrochloric, you know what medicine,
Hydroxychloroquine, yeah.
right? Just like he was pushing that. Again, that is the issue. I am never sure. My sister is a doctor as well, and she supports exactly what you said. We need to have this stuff publicly funded and try to mitigate profit. I'm not saying that there can't be profit, but it has to be mitigated in such a manner that the profit motive is solely there to create real innovation. But when it comes to the interface between healthcare and the community, it probably should be public, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's really simple here. If we change the way we thought about healthcare as being fundamentally patient-centered, right? What is best for the patient and their families? Then I think we would understand that we shouldn't be pushing interventions that are not well vetted, and that have a lot of other effects, right? These decisions should be made in shared partnership with patients, and I think at the end of the day, that's going to look like a system of prevention, and health and well-being in general, and not like acute therapies to address chronic issues that are there only because we did not educate people. We did not provide them with a preventative, preventative care to prevent the illnesses, chronic illnesses from emerging. I mean, it's because we are more profit centered. We end up, and it's almost secondary, right? The care of the patient is secondary to the profit that we can make. Then we always think about how we can cut costs, right? Like, and that is a disservice to the patient ultimately. But if we think first and foremost the patient, then of course we can also think about how do we also make money in this, right? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, Donna, let me tell you, first of all, you're my hero. I mean, that you're going out there and you're doing what you're doing, that you're keeping the pressure on. Thank you very much for what you're doing. Your activism is necessary. We just need a hell of a lot more of you. So please replicate yourself like a virus, and in a positive manner, that is. So anyhow, in closing, please tell our audience what they should be doing going forward politically and health-wise.
Yeah, so, it's November 2020 that we have, a really critical election coming up. And I think that this crisis has demonstrated to us how critical it is to have the right people in office making decisions that have huge implications for the public. So I think people should be thinking about, definitely getting out the vote for themselves to protect yourselves. I think as everybody is opening up, if you are so privileged that you are not forced to go back to work, I think that you should, just you stay at home as much as you can. I think universal masking is right to prevent the spread of this illness. Advocate as much as you can within your community with local officials and state officials, because our federal government seems to be completely non-receptive to doing the right thing about increasing testing and contact tracing in our communities.
Dona Murphey, Dr. Dona Murphey, thank you so kindly for speaking to us. Your words mean a lot. Have a wonderful day. And when you go out there to do that activism today, please keep that mask on tighter and please take care of yourself. We don't want you with another episode of something else. Thank you very much, Donna.
Absolutely. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, let me go ahead immediately and run to the boards because we don't have a lot of time. Let's see. Trust must be done. Truth must be done. Absolutely, Lawrence Sims. Daniel Ledo says, so instead of bitching about it, please tell us 2020 in hindsight, how would you have handled this irrational panic? This is not an irrational panic. This is what occurred because our president was completely derelict in his duty. If after he received his report in November, and everybody talking about January, I'm talking about November, the CIA started informing the president, but he never reads, started informing the president of what was happening in Wuhan. Even though China was not telling us about these issues, our president had CIA reports that he could have operated on. So let's not talk about January, where we had our first case at the same time with Korea. Now, South Korea, in as much as they started at the same time with us, remember, sir, South Korea has 265 deaths. We have 80-something thousand deaths. Normalize that for population, multiply 265 by 6, and you know what? It still turns out they are way under our numbers in deaths. So they handled it like intelligent human beings. We handle it exactly the way you expect to have it handled when led by a child president who has no science background, who thinks that injecting chlorine or some sort of disinfectant in your body would be successful in treating this virus, or sticking light beyond your nose and your lungs could somehow be successful. But we know what he was doing. He was trying to sell that light product from Canada, and he was trying to get that hydrochloroquine also sold. But that's all he cares about, money. So in hindsight, he missed the ball. He allowed the virus to escape. So when he talks about we've tested more than Korea, Yes, we've tested more than South Korea now. You know why? Because we allowed the virus to escape. South Korea is testing very little now because they're using contact tracing now because their initial tests normalized, or not normalized, but confined the disease where it could be controlled. No, we have a president that is so dumb, he has caused the lives of tens of thousands of American citizens. Yes, Lee Grant, the RCP has him at 46.1. You wonder who those 46.1 people are? And the reason why you wonder is you feel pretty concerned that their minds could be controlled by that thing that we have run in this country, that lack of intellect that we have run in this country. My God, how I wish for Bush at this point in time. And we used to say for Bush, some town is missing their resident idiot. That's what we thought about Bush. Bush seems pretty smart now. All right, let's see. Didn't Hillary say Donald have the temperament to be president, and Obama said that? I don't know when Hillary said that. If she said that, it must have been very in sort of a sarcastic modal. The only way I could think about it. Rashida hates America, and I'm supposed to care what? Why would you call a woman a bitch? Why would you do that? Why do you think it is okay to address women like that? Does your wife know you address women that way? Do you address your wife that way? That proves a lot about your intellect. Why would you call the woman a bitch? Why? I wish one of these women you called that taught you a lesson in such a manner that you never forget. How dare you? What's the best way for government to control people? No. That is the way that people get. Government is we the people. Anytime you talk about control of government, that is the kind of warped mentality that the plutocracy has given you. The plutocracy is sucking on the tits of government continuously. The plutocracy is flushed in money from the government, and then they tell you, oh, you depend on the government, then they control you. You depend on the government, then they control you. That's what the plutocracy tell clowns. The plutocracy tell all these right-wingers, oh my God, don't depend on the government, don't depend on the government. And they try to convince you of that. While in the background, all the money that you are sending to the government in taxes, guess where it's going? To them. Look at the stimulus, where most of it went. To them, to the people that have your mind, your little mind in control. That is who. You know, they're telling you, don't be dependent on the tits of the government. Don't be dependent on the tits of the government. Oh, right-wing followers, don't. But we are. The plutocracy is. You know, you sit down there thinking that, oh, all those poor people that could get up and work are the ones getting most of the money from the government. That's not true. The people getting the most money from the government is the plutocracy and the rich. And then say, oh, well, didn't they pay in more? Oh, yeah, they paid in more. And guess where they got the money to pay in? From you. You're the one they ripped off. Your labor they ripped off. Your intellect they ripped off. And then, because they have all that money, all your money, they pay it to the government, we the people. And then they say, but I don't want to give you that government all the money. So you guys have to start thinking, oh, dependent on the government, make you owned by the government, so that we, the plutocracy, in effect, is dependent on the government. So where do we get our money from, the plutocracy? We sucker you into paying higher prices for insurance. We sucker you into paying higher prices for products you invented, that you created, but we make the profit from it. And then at the same time, we go back to the government and we say, oh, government, give me a tax break. Oh, government, give me back the money. You see, the plutocracy, there's a certain sect in this country, because of their lack of levels of thinking in several levels of indirection, continue to screw themselves. Continue to screw themselves. I don't hate them for doing that. I hate those who have screwed their minds up. Not the people themselves, but those who have made Daniel Ledo think the way he thinks. I am hoping that as he listens more and as he loosens his lines of prejudice, as he loses his lines of ideology, that some seed will be planted. I will always be there to convince, to try, to talk. Okay, let's see what else is worth talking here. I'm not even going to go. Daniel Ledo wanted to know, why is this doctor wearing a mask? The doctor is wearing a mask as she spoke to me. and continuously putting cleaner on her hands to keep herself as sterile as possible. In as much as she has recovered from COVID-19, she wants to make sure that there are no slip-ups. Since there's so much we don't know about this virus, she is doing the responsible thing. Those people that are protesting all over the country without masks in close proximity, those are the people that apparently have no reasons to believe in science. Lee Grant, how you doing? Lee Grant, how you doing? Daniel Ledo, Lawrence Sims. Earlier I saw Bruce Pollard. So I forgot to give you guys an intro in the first one. Let me go to the bottom. Normal Reynolds, it is so interesting that we want 2020 hindsight rather than properly risk manage the issue. We now say, how can you control the result of inaction, ineptitude, and lack of due diligence? I could not have said that any better, my friend. Ian James Chapman, welcome aboard. There is socialism for the plutocracy and survival for the rest. Brother James Chapman, you hit the nail on the head. Daniel Ledo comes back and says, so President Egberto would have shut down the economy in November 2019? Well, yeah, and we would have been taken out of the White House in handcuffs. My friend, it's not about shutting down the economy, and that is, you see, they use words on you guys to make you believe. Don't tread on me. Remember that used to be the Tea Party thing you believed in, Daniel Ledo? Don't tread on me. Yo, we the people are treading on you. Let's get real, people. Let's get real. Another thing from Daniel. Only somebody who has no knowledge of history whatsoever would say something like, when government has all power, it doesn't control you. Again, that is your willful ignorance of what the definition of government is. Government is we, the people. People like say, yes, but there's a bureaucracy. Of course there's a bureaucracy, but the executive still controls the bureaucracy. And that's why our bureaucracy is in tatters. Our bureaucracy is in tatters because Donald Trump has proven that a bureaucracy still comes under the purview of the executive. I am originally a foreigner from Panama. That I understand American history, the Constitution, and how the government works much better than you do, Daniel Ledo, is shameful. There is a bureaucracy, and the executive controls the bureaucracy, and the fact that our bureaucracy is currently in tatters proves that the executive still has power over that bureaucracy. Because Trump has left us in tatters as well as he has left the bureaucracy in tatters. I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you so kindly. Daniel Ledo, my brother, Norman Reynolds, my new guy, Ian James Chapman, Lawrence Sims. Everybody, just thank you guys for being here. Please remember to share these videos, share everything that we do. That is how we are going to educate people. That is how we're going to enlighten people so that they don't continuously fall for the ridiculous tenets put out by the plutocracy. That is how we solve the problem. Folks, please do remember that I do need your support. So please go to store.politicsdoneright.com, store.politicsdoneright.com. Get one of our t-shirts, one of our cups, get some of our books. As I see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom. I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.